Computer. Hello there, my friend. How are you today?
Hey, buddy. Good morning. How you
Good,
feeling?
good. So we just got done last night. Seems like it's only been a few hours of playing D&D 5e adventure, the last 2014 formatted 5e adventure. At least we might do a hybrid kind of thing, and that's something we'll talk about because everybody's excited. Less than a week from now, the update to the player's handbook for D&D 5e comes out. And I know
Mhm.
you, Ryan, you have a ton of material on your channel about this. So why don't you plug what you've been up to? Because I know you've been busy lately.
Well, yeah, I generally don't chase the news and controversies because I find it exhausting, and the worst parts of the internet come out for it. But the last one felt like a big deal. They were going to kind of force upgrade everybody, and they were like, "Oh, you get the spells for free or whatever." But we were going to show up next week, and half of the spells on everybody's character sheet on D&D Beyond, I should
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
were going to be upgraded, which cool. But they're giving you the option to use legacy content, the 2014 stuff, for most things. But there was a moment there where some of the things are just going to be the new version. So all of a sudden, you're clicking on cure wounds and you're rolling different dice.
Yeah.
And we're still not, it's what, 6 days away, and I'm still not quite sure how we're going to navigate all the changes.
Yeah.
So I felt it important to have control over what your game is going to be like. So I made some noise about it. I let people know it was coming. A lot of people made some noise about it, and they reverted back to you can keep on keeping on. It's going to be a little more convoluted and clunky for you because there's like two concurrent versions of the game going on,
Right.
but they're not forcing you to change the way your character sheet functions.
So whether that functions at the table, we were talking about this actually in the parking lot after our session, and this is the kind of thing that a lot of parties are going to talk about. So I thought it'd be good to share what we came up with, and so you're open to the idea of like having players with the 2024 rule set and 2014 rule set at the same table at the same time. And that's cool. But we also talked about like, well, which should we all just have another session zero and just either transform these characters into the updated characters or what? And and it seemed like there were different so there's four player characters at our table, myself included,
Mhm.
and you. And so you're like, hey, I'm open to it, which is awesome for DM. You're open to do, what do you guys want to do? And other people are different. I don't know. We didn't get a really great temperature on like where everybody was with that.
I think there's so much uncertainty. I don't
Right.
know if anybody was holding back because I was like pushing a little bit at a certain point. I was like, I run a very because we have like newer players and people who've been with me for years. So I was like, I run a pretty democratic table. There's no wrong answer. I'm not gonna get mad. Like I'm
Right.
open to whatever.
Yeah.
Let's have a conversation here. And I think the majority was like abstain. It's like whatever. Like you tell me, man, because like I don't know, and I'm as deep in it as anybody, and like I don't really know. So I'm willing to do it on an individual basis, right? One person is like, I don't want to change anything until I know it's for me, which I respect. Um, well, I think Mike is a little more in my camp of like, I want to try the shiny new thing and see what it's like,
Hmm.
and that way I know if I like it or not. Um, and then
I think I'm in that camp too. I don't have to do it Tuesday because Tuesday is when we meet and Tuesday is when the book comes out. So I just, I didn't get an advance copy. I haven't read any spoilers. I mean, I've watched your videos. I've seen the discussions about certain things. I've watched a few videos where they kind of talked about the highlights of what's going to happen in the classes. The new fighter things look cool. The fact they're going to incorporate use of tool sets
mm,
seems more interesting. In fact, I play in a like about once a month Spelljammer campaign, and we have this running gag where we keep renaming the ship that we got, and that'll tie into this conversation because we also had a ship thing. So we renamed the ship, but the ship's name changes, and so So at first we called it something weird, and then somebody said, "Do you guys have the audacity to challenge us?" It's like, "Oh, we're the USS Audacity,"
Mm.
and then we're pulling into like this docking station, and there's a bunch of military ships there, and we're obviously outnumbered. We can't fight our way out. So we get on hailing frequencies, and my character's like, "We're the USS Humility." And but then somebody realizes we have to like go out and paint the side of the ship now and like change the name. So the one character, she's playing like an automaton, and she has calligraphy tools,
Mm.
and she's like literally the only time calligraphy tools have come up in a D&D campaign that she remembers. And I thought that's pretty solid. Like that's pretty cool. So yeah. Anyway, she
Yeah.
was able to get it done in time. We were able to pull off the ruse, but partially. But yeah, so let's get into what happened last night. Yeah, that we were climbing on board a ship. We were gonna like we're gonna pose as smugglers. There was a ship offshore. We found like a note with like a pattern of like code, and we found like a lamp that you could open and close a shutter on to communicate like simple dots and dashes. So we did that, and then we had a little moment where we're like, oh, this is gonna be great. They're gonna come to us. We're gonna ambush them. And then it was like, no, you have to go out to them.
Mm.
So we kind of screwed that whole thing up. And we didn't really have too much of a plan, which I thought was funny, but not smart going into it. We're just like, okay, let's pull up to the side of the ship. But as we kind of like, we had a week to think about it, and obviously Mike thought about it a little bit. And he was, if you saw our previous session, there was a fog cloud cast in a cave. So he thought, oh, fog cloud, we can use that. And so obscure the rowboat that we're in so that they can't see us at first, and then we're already like in the middle of like, we kind of like get our entree that way. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, you did a pretty good job infiltrating. There was a lot of uh what looked like planning. There was 15, 20 minutes of conversation before you launched, and then you got there and it wasn't.
No,
I think I
no,
think
the
it's a
rogue
function
went
of like
rogue. I went rogue. My
I,
character was like, okay,
yeah.
this isn't gonna work. So I'm gonna go climb up the rudder. And and then kind of I was supposed to be the face and kind of do the deception thing. So I wasn't there anymore. So those guys had to kind of fend for themselves. So split the party and went rogue, and that was probably not that was definitely not part of the plan. But it ended up working out pretty well.
It worked. I mean, it worked out. It worked out. It was you had some good rolls. You were outnumbered, but you managed to deal with the pirates, these smugglers, like in stages. You managed to like create choke points and like literally bulkheads.
Yeah, the guys like
So
shut
you
a
didn't.
door at one point and
Yeah.
isolated like the spellcaster, which is huge. Yeah. So that was pretty cool.
Yes. So that fog cloud got pushed out to sea.
Hmm.
And I don't know if everybody realized what that meant, that
Yeah.
there was a wizard on the boat. Because I said it and didn't get. I don't think anyone connected the dots.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was one of those 3-hour 5e combats. But I don't. It was never boring. I kept the
No.
tension up. No one's turn takes forever because we're level 2 right now. Um,
No, but there were a lot of NPCs. So like there were a lot of targets. It was a target rich environment. But yeah,
yes.
it was we were able to do things in I think every character was able to do things in a certain in ways that were that like play their strengths.
Yep.
So even Bertram's character, who's the sorcerer, he ended, high charisma spellcaster. So he ended up kind of being the voice of the party uh with the fog cloud and the negotiations and that sort of thing. And he looked like he was having a lot of fun doing that. So I
Hmm.
was really happy that that was his role.
And
because
he has the sailor background. So I'm always looking for opportunities to make background matter. Right? I freaking wrote a book about it. But
yeah,
like, okay, you're a sailor. Like you would know this. You would have advantage on whatever, trying to recall this or trying to ascertain. Like you roll up to the ship. How many people are on the ship? Like you see two guys looking over with a rope ladder, but like
yeah,
you are a sailor, so you say, okay, that this 10 to 12 people are probably crewing this ship. They probably don't
yeah.
have like a full force of people here because they're trying to keep costs down.
Sure, but
Um,
you need a minimum of a certain amount of people to actually
right,
like do this thing, like actually
right.
put this thing out to sea. You can't just like push off with two people and be like, oh, well, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is
Mm-hmm.
a big enough ship that that's not going to be workable. So that was the problem that I was thinking when we were getting on board. It's like there's four of us, there's a dozen of them. Well, that's we're outnumbered. So what do we do? But Princess Snowfall at Dusk, Mike, he's playing a character that was an NPC in a previous campaign, which is really a lot of fun.
That's like
But
so great.
she's a woman, and this is a pirate crew that presumably is all male. So she casts Charm Person on the first pirate she sees, and he basically becomes enamored with her, and it's like, hey, come on board, and that was pretty funny. That was a neat moment for Mike. Uh, but yeah, because he got to shine with that because he likes to use that. He likes to use that Charm Person.
And it took you guys pretty far. You got into the hold.
Yeah.
You got deep into the middle of the ship. And then there was another charm person.
No, that
The
didn't work.
bosun made his save, and then it was on. And he has a hook for a hand and stabbed it into her shoulder, and like now you're grappled. There's a hook in you.
But Patrick has this like mitigate damage thing going on. So
Yes,
what is that exactly?
yes.
That's a paladin skill.
That's yeah, I forget off the top of my head. It's early.
Yeah, right. I hear you.
But
But
yeah,
like,
he has not
and he could
defensive
take a
fighting.
D10 or a 10 points or
Yeah,
something.
it is his reaction. So he does it once per turn. There's opportunity costs to it. You can't make attack opportunity or whatever. But yeah, he can mitigate damage, which I mean kept the druid up, I think,
That
for
saved our lives.
yeah.
That saved
That made an impact on the fight for sure.
that saved Mike the Druid's life, Princess Snowfall, and then she saved my life later, coming up on up to the to help me with the captain and his bodyguard or whoever he was ordering around.
You had a very cinematic fight with the captain because you watched them leave. You were hanging off the tiller.
Yeah,
off
so I
the
was hanging off the tiller. The guy was manning the tiller. The captain and there's three pirates. So the captain, he's like, yeah, you can definitely tell this guy's a captain. He's wearing a coat. And actually, Mike he paints figurines. He had a great figurine for it. And then he said, but when they heard a fracas down below, they start going towards that. So I was able to one off the guy holding the rudder. So holding the actual like tiller. So fortunately, because here's how this happens, kids. So this is one way to do this, right? I'm only level 2. I'm probably not going to one shot this guy, even with sneak attack, right? Even with that extra die roll.
he had 40 something hit points. Yeah, he was the captain for a reason. He's the
Oh,
toughest guy on this boat.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's true. But I was actually thinking I'm not even going to one shot this underling guy. That's the guy holding the tiller.
Uh,
So
uh,
so can I do that? So I was thinking of all kinds of things like can I throw him overboard, with surprise or whatever, but I'm not very strong. So that's like a strength check usually. So I'm like, that's not going to work. So I figure, okay, I'll backstab him and get the, surprise. But what I did was I held my action. I said, okay, here, when it became my turn mechanically, I'm talking about when it became my turn in combat, said, I'll hold my action. If these two guys leave, then I'm going to backstab. I'm going to pounce on this guy that's alone at the tiller. So I got that attack, and then I got my attack when it came around my turn again. So I was able to finish him off before this guy could attack me. So that's one way to try to schedule things in the initiative order if you're a player, like that's a possibility depending on how things run. So that's an interesting way to do things.
Surprise is a powerful underutilized tool. in a lot of in a lot of fights, in a lot of fights. If you can get the drop on an enemy, you can get a free round essentially, and that's it's all about the action economy. So if I hit you twice before you even move, that's going to make a big difference to the fight for sure.
Absolutely. And then yeah, and then the cinematic part with this guy who doesn't move that well. I guess I don't know if he had a peg leg or not, but he was not the captain wasn't moving quickly.
I was
So
giving him swagger. I was like, this guy's not dashing. This is his boat. He's
oh,
yeah.
he's
He's a swashbuckler essentially. He adds
I see.
charisma to his attack rolls. So like I was just like, he's not gonna dash. He's
Swashbuckler is fun. I thought about going that way. In fact, we're going to be level 3, and I thought maybe I'll
hmm,
go Swashbuckler, but um, but everybody else is casting spells and I'm not, and I'm getting like jealous. So I'm thinking I'm Arcane Trickster, but we'll see what happens
I like
over
an
the
arcane
course of the week.
trickster.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun. So yeah, so we were able to like resolve that. I basically shot the guy in the neck. He pulls a 1+1 arrow out of his shoulder or whatever, and it's like, you're gonna +1 me, and then let's get him. And so it's on, but I'm doing the rogue thing where you attack, then you hide, then you attack, then you hide. That worked a couple times. And
Yeah,
so that can be very, like you said, that's a very powerful rogue thing to do. So if you're playing rogue, learn how to use your bonus action to hide.
yeah. You hit him and you hid
Mhm.
in a way that like maybe you jumped off a ship, right? Like it wasn't just I know he's here somewhere in this tree line or whatever. You like
Right.
went off the back of the boat.
For a
I
minute,
don't
I
know.
was gonna jump off the ship.
Yeah.
That
Well, there was
was,
an athletics check where it's like, well, you might be
yeah,
falling
yeah,
off this ship.
yeah. I
Um,
might just end up in the water anyway.
but yeah, you also again you held your action there because for like whatever in the heat of the moment, I was like, this guy is not. He's just talking trash and like walking. He's not. This guy is not dashing,
That's not
especially
his
with his
style.
underling right next to him.
Hmm.
So you hid. He didn't see you. He was coming to search for you. And you held your action and you stabbed him in the tongue, which he
Oh,
was I had some good lines. I was like, all right. But
well, then that's funny. I did that kind of for flavor and no pun intended, but you said, that might have consequences if he has like a commanding voice, right? He's charismatic, so does that affect, can he
he has a
buff his
reaction.
underling?
Exactly. If the it wasn't the first mate, but if like yeah, if his underling swings and misses, he can use his reaction to force a reroll. Um it's like put your back into it or something piratey, you know.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Um
So that ended up being serendipitous
So
that that
yeah, so I was like,
worked.
oh, okay.
Mhm.
And I bumped the AC a little bit because like tongue is a smaller target than a whole person,
Yeah.
but you got there. I was like, all right, yeah, this guy can't talk.
Well, so that's a good like learning moment there, I think, for players and DMs is that there's a reason why you don't just say, okay, roll dice, okay, you hit, okay, roll damage. There's a reason why you say things like, okay, describe what happened,
Mhm.
or where exactly are we, or how, the miniatures, we use miniatures in a map that can lend to the story, but it can lend to other mechanical ideas as
Mhm.
well, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that kind of interplay that comes with being fully engaged and kind of like you said, cinematically, like playing it out like it's a movie script, that can actually change games, you know?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
I try, especially early in a campaign, very much, and like early in a session, I try to ask those questions. Like the sorcerer cast magic missiles for the first time this campaign. It's like, what do your magic missiles look like?
Nice.
What the paladins it's not an aura. I forget the defensive reaction, but I was like, what are you doing when that happens? Like what does that look like? You asked me if you had a free hand, basically. I forget if it was a two-handed attack or you're trying to
No,
like
it was what it
offhand.
was is I was standing on the tiller, or I'm standing on the rudder, and I'm wondering if I'm going to be able to light a pot of oil
Right.
and an oil flask and throw it, because we were going to just cause mayhem that was another option for like resolving this mission, is we were on a mission to prevent this smuggling ring or cripple them, disable them, something, and we were possibly going to set the ship on fire. But then I thought, well, I can use it as a distraction.
Hmm.
Maybe that way get the captain and that mate to like leave. And then I said, once they moved, I said, no, I'm just going to ambush this guy. But that's what I was thinking at that moment. Is like, just am I hanging on by like both hands, or am I one-handed, or am I actually able to stabilize myself and do something with that takes an action? And like you said, like lighting a flask of oil takes an action, throwing it takes another action. That's two
Hmm.
actions. So one of
Hmm.
them's going to have to be a held action. The next one's going to have to be the action when it comes time. So, you know, that type of mechanic as well. Like,
And I
thinking about how to do
used
this.
and I used to think I had to make those rulings authoritatively, right? Like quickly and by myself. And the longer I'm doing this, the more I'm willing to like talk it out. It's like, well, I mean, I think you're at least using one hand, right? To hold you're holding onto a rail of a ship.
Yeah.
Could convince me that you're not, maybe, but like we'll figure this out together. And that comes with experienced players and will trust at the table. You can't do that in every group, but I do that more and more as I become an experienced dungeon master. It's like I'm doing less and less lately, and putting more and more on the player side, or just like on the table, right? Like you ask me a question, another player's input is perfectly valid as long as they're not trying to like stack the deck on the player's side, or burn you for fun. I guess it cuts both ways. But
Well, it
yeah,
depends.
you
Yeah, it
don't need to have
depends.
all the answers.
It also depends on the kind of campaign you're running. So if you're running a superhero campaign where everybody's going to win, win, win,
Hmm.
and that's
Hmm.
fun,
Hmm.
and you're having fun doing that, totally fine. That's fine. But like, we're not superheroes yet. We're level 2, even though, better than most, but still by D&D 5e standards, not a ton of things, you're not going to conquer. You're not going to like cut a swath through like a bunch of people, yet. That can happen at later levels, which can be fun too. But yeah, so that's why you got to get the big baddies out there. But anyway, we got a ship.
Hmm.
We took a ship. They took the ship. At one point, a couple of crewmen down below with the other 3 party members, they surrendered, which I love, which is realistic, which is, like that happens. Not everybody fights to the death,
Yes.
especially a bunch of smugglers just trying to make a buck. They're not they're not like fanatics, cultists, thralls. There's no motivation for them to like lose their lives if they're like, oh, change of captain, okay, I'm a crew member under your command now. Fine, you know what I mean? Like they're gonna live another day, and who knows, maybe even get the opportunity to
I mean,
get a
how do you
bigger,
think that how do you
yeah,
think that guy became the captain in the first place?
right,
Right? Like
yeah, the
this
dread
ain't, this ain't
pirate
their
party,
first rodeo. This ain't their first mutiny.
right. And then, if I'm like one of those guys, like I'm like, well, maybe this captain will be better than the last one. Maybe we'll get a share of the, who knows what. But like, it's that's gonna happen if I'm dead. So,
And you did play things out, so you were observing the bosun bossing those guys around because you had built in some time. You like did some trickery. I don't think you realized. So what was it? Prestidigitation. I'm going to put this mark. I am like the sailor, sorcerer. I know sailors are suspicious. I'm like, yeah, yeah, hell yeah, they are. He puts a mark on a box. He's like, "What's that? I'm not touching anything. Hold on." And then the first mate was like, "Ooh, I'm gonna go get this other guy who knows about magic." And that was like, "There's a wizard. He's coming."
that was really clever.
And
That was
you
that was
locked the door behind him basically with your charm. The charmed guy bought you like 3 rounds. Like he's eventually going to move to the first mate, but you barred the door as best you could in the process and the time. It was yeah, and
yeah,
that's the reason you took
those
the ship
those
basically.
guys did a great, they were amazing. They did a great job. I don't know if I would have been any help down there. It was or as much help, because it was a crowded room. There were barely enough
Yes.
room on the table to put the figures in each like hex. But yeah, it was neat. But the spoils on the ship, very colorful. So I have to ask you, were you using just the ghosts of Saltmarsh, or were you using another older? I think you mentioned something about an older module that you were,
Well, it is so the Ghost of Saltmarsh is an anthology.
right.
The whole book is an anthology of older adventures
Okay.
that they've kind of woven together, but not that much. It requires some work on the DM side if you don't want it to be episodic, which I don't think there's anything wrong with like an episodic campaign, especially if you put in some downtime. Not everything has to be one grand narrative because that creates expectations that are eventually hard to match. Anyway,
Yeah.
this is one of the oldest adventures in the book. I forget off the top of my head, but like this is like late 80s. And I was reading blocks of I was like, you guys got to hear what like these walls of text sound like. It's like somebody took out a nautical thesaurus.
Yeah.
And like every because it was a different style of play too. Like the fact that you know there's a lantern hanging from a chain off the ceiling, like maybe you're going to do something with that.
I thought for sure they were going to do something with that. I thought, okay, tieflings, elves, not, they were going to like extinguish the lantern. Now they
Mm.
have dark vision and nobody else does. They didn't go for that, which I thought was interesting. That was an
Hmm.
interesting move. I would have done that. I would have knocked the lantern off the chain.
But yeah, every you don't have to tell me every room that there's a hooded lantern chain on a chain hanging from the beam. I forgot. I don't know. There was so like, and then in the starboard aft there's a chest and a bed. The bed is made. The bed's unmade. It's just like the level of
Yeah,
detail
and
that's
a
like superfluous.
polished
It's
boots as opposed to
yes.
unpolished. And I mean that's interesting. They were writing it like it was taking it out of a novel or something. Yeah, that was pretty cool. I mean, I get it. Like it gives you the style and the flavor, and I think, like you said, maybe the way D&D was run then was more of a storytelling kind of like the DM is like is the storyteller, which still exists, but I always go back to this one interview I had with Marco Fasati, who's Italian DM. You can find him on YouTube as well. I mean on find him on Facebook. Anyway, he was saying like if you read the Dungeon Master's Guide, it says the Dungeon Master is a player at the table.
Mm,
And I thought, well, that's an interesting, that's very interesting philosophy. So like the dungeon master's supposed to have fun too. They just adjudicate the rules, right? Because I think what happens sometimes is there's this like, because the dungeon master represents the obstacles that are in the player's way, the puzzles, the NPCs that they're fighting, that sort of thing. Sometimes there is this natural like tendency to see an adversarial relationship, like a
mm.
contest, like we're playing Monopoly and it's like, and the DM is one side and the players are the other side. But that's not the case, right? Like that's really not the way that it's outlined in the 5e Dungeon Master's Guide. And that's not the way I play. I mean, yes, nobody else here is going to role play the goblins. I'll role play the goblins, but like I have no vested interest in whether the goblins win or not.
Hmm.
Like that's just up to you and the roll of the dice. Like, and you've said that in previous sessions that we've talked about, where it's like, hey, the dice are rolling. The dice are, and sometimes you'll even say, well, the dice are going to determine in which order these guys go and who they're going to attack. So, you know,
Yeah, that's why I don't use the screen because it gets rid I mean you lose the ability to fudge. You lose some of the like mystique, but what you gain is like this equality, essentially. I don't want to kill you. These goblins want to kill you, and it's my job to make sure that they act accordingly.
right,
However, like here you go. He's got a +4. Boom. Roll the D20.
right,
Everybody sees it. It happens. I didn't do it. It happens.
right. I mean, if you can't lose, then
Ah,
at
well,
some point, if you know that you can't lose, then that's
yes.
going to affect your decision making, right?
Yes. Yes.
So,
And then it's a different game, which is a lot of
yeah,
people are having fun playing that game, but
yeah,
that's less fun for me. And I find that's less fun for most people of eventually. Maybe not for a session or two, but then it's like the nothing matters. The drama goes out of it. The tension goes out of it.
sure, sure, exactly. So
And I
now,
mean, you guys were level 2, pretty underpowered. You faced you were outnumbered 3-1.
yeah,
there was a CR, I don't know, CR2, CR3 captain, a bunch of grunts, a couple like lieutenant-y guys. There was literally a wizard with a couple spells. Um, and nobody dropped to zero. You guys did
And
it handily.
no,
It was tense for a couple hours.
yeah.
It was never a sure thing, but you guys took over the ship.
And now we have a ship, and we were like, and then we got into the old school D&D investigate room to room to room,
Yes.
open, look to try to detect unsuccessfully detect traps on boxes, take damage trying to pick the locks, and that's some fun stuff there too. So yeah, I'm gonna have to get myself a what do they call that armor that the guys that the bomb squad wears. I'm gonna have to
Oh
get some of
God,
those
yeah.
kind of, like
Or just
gloves.
a new die. Your dice went cold after combat. Like your investigation checks were like 4, 7, 4. I was like, nope, like, seems fine.
Yeah, well, I'd rather take damage out of combat than in combat, so
Sure, sure,
that's
sure.
totally fine. Yeah, and we found a sea elf. So what's a sea elf?
So a sea elf is think elf times mermaid. He's got legs, but they live underwater. They're technically amphibious, right? He's breathing air right now. But I like elves being weird, right? They're Vulcans, they're Fae. When half the party's elves, it's harder to pull off. But like, okay, sea elf, like this is what like you didn't know these things were real.
You didn't even know that
Like,
existed. Yep.
you've never seen one of these guys before. And he legit he doesn't speak common, which I love. I love an NPC that's just like, all right, I'll play charades, I'll draw pictograms or something if it comes down to it. But he speaks Elvish and he speaks Aquan, which is like the underwater tongue. So again, you guys have an elf and two half elves. So most of you have Elvish, so communication was pretty easy. But now you have an NPC ally who knows a little bit more about, you figured out pretty handily a lot of what's going on here between him and hostages essentially, and then some
Lizard
like reconnaissance, some
lizard
paperwork.
men. Yeah.
Yeah, there's lizard folk on this boat that you still haven't dealt with who
Right.
are like emissaries overseeing like a weapons shipment. And again, lizard folk is one of those things, especially in old school D&D, where like these things are fundamentally different than you. Um, in modern D in 5e, there's 50 species that are playable races. They're all just humans with funny hats at that stage.
Right.
But like, okay, this thing is reptilian, it's cold-blooded, it's not evil. It has a
Different
different
agenda.
sense of ethics than you do. It's not it the first mate's like, I'm pretty sure they eat people. And like whether or not that's true, that's the outlook on these guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the fact that they're like spending Electrum to get mass shipments of arms. It's like, okay, what's their deal? What's happening here? What are the lizard folk up to?
Yeah, and we found a map to presumably their location
Mm-hmm.
or where the drop off is, or maybe their hideout. So we're gonna, so that's a great uh, little thing, because what's a pirate ship without a pirate map, right? So like that's awesome. Great flavor. All right, well, I think I gotta cut this one short. So this is a great session. I had a lot of fun. It was a lot of combat, but like you said, it was never boring, and that's a trick. That's a good thing to be able to pull off, because D&D can get bogged down in the combat and waiting your turn and that kind of stuff. But this was really fun. Yeah.
Yeah, you
All right.
throw in some RP and you just make sure everyone gets their adequate time in the spotlight, which is it's challenging sometimes when you're doing 3 hours of math. But
Exactly. Exactly. Well, next week we'll be playing. There'll be a new rule book out. I don't know if we'll have anything going on with that, but we tune
oof.
in next week and we'll talk about what happens as far as whether or not somebody rolls up a new character or uses hybrid rules, and we'll see how it goes. This will be an interesting learning experience for us all, I
Mm-hmm.
think.
Mm-hmm.
So, and check out Ryan's content. He's been streaming. He's got a whole bunch of like celebrity YouTube, D&D, masters on his streams, and it's been fun to watch. So I really enjoy your content, and thanks for doing this interview. We'll see you next
Yeah,
week.
heck yeah. Thanks everybody.
Talk to you later.